America jumped into the war between Israel and Iran over the weekend as US President Donald Trump announced airstrikes on Iran's 3 principal nuclear sites. President Trump is now claiming a ceasefire agreement has been reached between the two, although they are yet to confirm the ceasefire has been agreed to again, but some news sources are saying Iran has agreed to a ceasefire with Israel. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has called for diplomacy and dialogue. Foreign Minister Winston Peters said ongoing military action in the Middle East is extremely worrying. Meanwhile, the government has sent a Hercules to the region and is talking with commercial airlines about getting citizens to safety. So the intervention of the US in the conflict has raised concerns about what is next. How does it affect New Zealand? From our citizens that may be overseas, the price of petrol and KiwiSaver. Jeffrey Miller is an international geopolitical analyst, and it's good to have him on the show. Jeffrey, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Leah. Good to be with you.
Nice. Hey, why now, Jeffrey? What pushed Israel to strike when it did?
Well, look, never a dull moment in the Middle East at the moment, and never a dull moment with Donald Trump in the White House. You know, we've all forgotten almost that the whole tariff spat for back in April with Liberation Day. We moved on to war with Iran. Who knows what will be happening next month? You know, it's just, as I say, it's just an endless series of events that we've had since January. But look,
keep going.
No, look, I mean, Israel has had concerns for decades over Iran and its nuclear ambitions, and Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken out for years about this, saying that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and he's seen an opportunity because of what we've seen since October 7th, 2023, when that brutal attack by Hamas on Israel took place. And then Israel has waged war on Hamas, and then last year it went into Lebanon and heavily degraded Hezbollah in Lebanon. These are proxies of Iran. They're largely funded by Iran. Certainly that's where the weaponry comes from. We also saw Bashar al-Assad's regime fall in Syria back in December, and that was also an Iran-friendly regime. So the proxies have been largely, they've been degraded. They haven't been exactly neutered. They're still there. But suddenly there's an opportunity there, if you're Benjamin Netanyahu, to go for what he sees as the head of the snake, which is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in Tehran, and to go all out, bomb the nuclear site, the nuclear facilities, and a lot of other facilities of the regime and regime targets, kill off nuclear scientists and bomb university and state TV and all manner of other sites that we're not even sure yet exactly what they are. But there's been a whole range of targets that Israel has targeted in Tehran and around Iran in the last 10 days. And then at the weekend, Donald Trump decided to enter the fray and to join the bombing campaign itself. And that is because the US has military capabilities that Israel ultimately does not.
Sure. I want to get to that, Jeffrey. Do you believe Iran's nuclear threat is as immediate as Israel has claimed? Or is it about regional influence and deterrence?
Look, this is where there are a real range of opinions. And Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence in Trump's administration, said back in March that the assessment was that Iran was not actively working towards a nuclear weapon at the moment. But Iran does have nuclear ambitions at the same time. There is no doubt about that. Iran probably would like to get a nuclear weapon at some point because Israel has a nuclear weapon and they want to have parity with Israel. So I think that is fair to say that. The question is what you then do about it. Now, this is where I part company with the Israelis and the United States. The idea of bombing them into submission, I think, will only make Tehran more determined in the future to get hold of a nuclear weapon. And having had the bombings that we've seen over the last 10 days, I think that will only galvanize public opinion in Iran behind the regime and will increase the determination to build a nuclear weapon. And you don't necessarily need massive facilities in the end. I mean, a lot of these facilities are quite big because there is a nuclear energy program on top, but to actually build a nuclear weapon, you don't necessarily need absolutely massive bases. And so I think it will drive this further underground, and I don't think Iran will give up. But this latest round of escalation, thankfully, perhaps seems to be over with the ceasefire that Donald Trump announced this morning, and it's meant to have come into force just in the last half hour or so. Seems to be in place, from the initial report.
Jeffrey, you mentioned Hezbollah. There's been talk of Hezbollah and even Houthi involvement. How much danger was there then to become a multi-front war?
Well, I think we've already had that since October the 7th. We've had all the different fronts involved. We've had Hezbollah, we've had Hamas, We've had the Houthis in Yemen firing missiles at Israel. We've now got Iran. We've had Syria involved. I mean, we've had all the different players involved now. But the Houthis are heavily degraded because Israel has managed to bomb them. Hezbollah, of course, is heavily degraded after the pager attacks and Israel's ground invasion airstrikes that we had last year. So now, as I said, it's kind of the opportunity if you're Benjamin Netanyahu to go for the jugular, as it were.
You always think, Jeffrey, that Donald Trump was always going to bring America into it. You mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, he earlier ignored her saying that Iran wasn't building nuclear weapons, although she has now changed her position, walked that back. So he was always going to be there, do you think?
Look, we had this guessing game last week in a way with Donald Trump, will he or won't he? But I think it was all actually a big deception, a big ruse, and I had that feeling last week, and I really think that's been borne out, that was just designed to confuse the Iranians, to keep them guessing as to what was going to come, to give them, to keep that element of surprise, and so that was what all the, I'm going to decide within 2 weeks was about with Donald Trump. I actually think that this has been being cooked up for quite some time, because I don't think you necessarily make these plans on the hoof, and
not.
there was some suggestion with Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump that they didn't get on. Remember, Donald Trump, he made his first big foreign trip outside the United States in May, but he only went to the Gulf states and the Middle East. He bypassed Israel. And there was some talk over those early months of the second term of the Donald Trump administration that he'd got offside with Netanyahu, that he didn't like Netanyahu and so forth. But I wonder if that was all orchestrated and actually they were getting on very well behind the scenes, but they deliberately decided to pretend otherwise, so to keep that element of surprise in a way for Iran. But I think the hawks have had Donald Trump's ear. Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, these hawkish Republicans, they've had Donald Trump's ear over the past few months, and especially over the last couple of weeks. Donald Trump has seen Israel go and bomb these sites, in his view, probably successfully, and he wanted to have a piece of the action and wanted to claim the credit and claim the success. I mean, we all know that Donald Trump is very vain, and he wanted to be part of it. So it is very much on brand for Donald Trump to be centre of attention.
He also doesn't he also want to be the man that's seen to also bring peace to the Middle East?
Indeed, and this is the thing with Donald Trump. There's so many inconsistencies. He does have this reputation for being a deal maker. He introduced the Abraham Accord back in the first term of the Trump administration, which are these series of peace deals signed with the UAE, between Israel and the UAE, Israel and Bahrain, and a number of other countries in the Middle East and North Africa. And he liked the idea, I think, of being this peacemaking figure, and he put one of his posts out on Truth Social the other day, talking all about how he should win the Nobel Peace Prize but wouldn't get it, etc. And he likes that idea. And look, I'm not going to be churlish. I mean, this ceasefire is a good thing. Peace is always a good thing. However it comes to pass, I mean, I think you can have some debates. I mean, is Donald Trump really the arsonist claiming credit for putting out the fire here? But look, if we just park all of that, the weapons have died down in Tehran, the bombing has stopped, and that's a good thing. Peace is good. Peace is fundamentally good. We need more of it, by the way, all around the Middle East, because there's still a war in Gaza raging. The ceasefire in Gaza broke down in March. And Trump came in January. Remember that initial ceasefire in Gaza was negotiated by Trump and his team. And it held for 2 months, and then it broke down, and now we're back to square one, and we're getting 50 to 100 Palestinians being killed, it seems, every day waiting for food. It's horrific. It's shocking. And we need a peace deal there. We need a ceasefire. So I want Donald Trump to move on and get a peace deal again in Gaza, get another ceasefire. We need peace breaking out all across the Middle East, and I don't really mind so much how we get there, as long as we do get there, because it is shocking for the 55,000 Palestinians who have lost their lives, for the 1,200 Israelis who were killed on October 7th, all the hostages, and many of them are still there. It's horrific, Jeffrey, what we've seen in the past 2 years.
For New Zealand, for a little old New Zealand sitting down the end of the world, Winston Peters has said it is the most serious crisis in his role as Foreign Minister, and the PM has called for diplomacy. What is our role, Jeffrey? What is New Zealand's role? What should we be doing, do you think?
It's interesting. Winston Peters compared this with the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1952, and unlike myself, he has a memory of that, obviously, and there are some parallels there, and Donald Trump in his post on Truth Social today announcing the ceasefire talked about 12 days of war. Well, the Cuban Missile Crisis lasted for 13 days. I think there was a movie made on the Cuban Missile Crisis of the same name, and so it's roughly the same timeline. But when it comes to New Zealand's role, I think New Zealand does need to be speaking out in favour of a dialogue, diplomacy, de-escalation. That's what Winston Peters has done. I think we also need to be taking that a little bit further, though, because I don't think this was helpful, to be honest. What Donald Trump did at the weekend, going in there, adding fuel to the fire and bombing Iran, I don't think was productive. I don't think what Israel did was helpful. I think Iran was at the negotiating table. There were negotiations going on. Donald Trump had arranged those with Steve Witkoff. They had 5 rounds of negotiations with Iran in Muscat and Oman and the Gulf, and there was meant to be a 6th round. And then Israel came over the top, bombed Iran, and then the Iranian foreign minister was sitting at the table with European foreign ministers last Friday, and then Donald Trump came in over the top and bombed Iran. I don't think it's helpful. In the end, war should always be it should be the solution only after you've tried all the diplomatic means. And I don't think we were at a diplomatic dead end. So I think New Zealand needs to be saying, perhaps behind closed doors, Christopher Luxon is over in NATO this week, and he might get a chance to talk to Donald Trump or his European counterparts. And I think perhaps behind closed doors, perhaps he needs to say, look, New Zealand really didn't find this particularly edifying, watching from the bottom of the world, watching the various powers slug it out across the Middle East. I mean, we're lucky that we've got to this ceasefire, but there's been an element of luck here, as well as good management, perhaps, if you can call that, on the part of Donald Trump. Because in the end, there are always two parties involved, and in the end, Iran had to accept this ceasefire. I mean, they struck back at the Al Udeid air base in Qatar in the Gulf overnight, and we're just lucky that they decided they didn't want to roll the dice on World War III, and so they informed the United States and Qatar in advance that they were going to be doing these strikes, and they were rather performative. But I think we're rather lucky and fortunate that one of those missiles didn't go wayward, hit some people on the streets of Doha in Qatar, or that they didn't decide to conduct a bigger strike, because then the United States or Qatar would perhaps feel obliged to respond and retaliate, and then the cycle of violence would only continue. So I think it's fortunate that we are in the position that we are as of right now. It seems that the ceasefire is in place, but things are far from calm across the Middle East, and there are reports of drone strikes in Iran from forces sympathetic to Iran. So look, things are still in a real state of confusion over there, and it's a mess. I think New Zealand needs to be speaking out, saying, look, we need cool heads to prevail here, because we might not be so lucky next time around.
What is the impact on us? I've seen, you would have seen, there's been conversations of the cost of bumping up the price of oil, so petrol, fill up your car now kind of thing, our hit to KiwiSaver. What else are the impacts when we see something like this happen?
Well, we've been fortunate because the oil markets have actually been pretty resilient, and they've priced a lot of this in. And when we just had those strikes this morning, when it seemed that would be the retaliation from Iran, these more performative strikes against the airbase in Qatar, the oil price went down, and it's now back around, I think, the $65 barrel mark, where it was a couple of weeks ago. So it went up, and then it went down, went up to close to $80 a barrel, now back to 65. So that's good. That's good news. But if the worst did come to pass, you've got to remember the region that you're dealing with. 20% of the world's oil flows through the narrow Strait of Hormuz that goes between Oman and Iran. It's a very narrow waterway, 33 kilometres at its narrowest point. So it's kind of similar to Cook Strait in terms of width. It's very narrow, and all of that oil comes out of Saudi Arabia, in particular UAE. These are the world's biggest oil producers, and it's got to get through that narrow corridor to get to market. There isn't really an alternative option. So this is why we're so vulnerable to what happens over there. And Iran could have blockaded the Strait of Hormuz. That was one of their options. They could have attacked ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and it wouldn't even necessarily even need to come to that. It would only take commercial ships to be too afraid to go through the Strait of Hormuz, perhaps for insurance reasons, and that everything would just come to a grinding halt, much in the way that traffic came to a halt through the Suez Canal back in after October 7th, when the Houthis were conducting strikes there. So we saw the Suez Canal basically go out of commission for a period because of the strikes by the Houthi rebels on commercial shipping, and instead ships had to go the long way around Africa. There isn't an alternative route with the Strait of Hormuz, because the oil's just got to come out that way. There isn't an alternative route.
So look, we've got a reported ceasefire at the moment, Jeffrey. So, like you said, ceasefire is always a good thing. Can you see there's a diplomatic off-ramp here that's being negotiated? Or are you still concerned that we are looking at World War III? I know that's a big thing to say.
It is. Look, we've had so many rounds of escalation. I think that's the best way to look at what's happening in the Middle East since October the 7th. We have these different rounds. We had the round with Hezbollah in Lebanon, for example, late last year, and then things quietened down a bit. So look, I think this round with Iran is probably over. I hope so. And then we go back to negotiations. But I think each time we cross these red lines, we're worse off than we were before. And you just got to remember, this is unprecedented, and many listeners will probably have Middle East fatigue, and I can understand that, given everything that's happened over the past couple of years. But we haven't had a direct head-to-head confrontation between the United States and Iran in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran since 1979. And until last year, we'd never had a head-to-head confrontation between Israel and Iran, and then there were two limited rounds in April and October. This is far, far bigger than anything we've seen before, and it's very, very dangerous. So I think we've got to embrace the ceasefire, but a ceasefire is just that. It's not a permanent diplomatic solution. In the end, we need to go back to the negotiating table, as everyone keeps saying. We need to go back to Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's golfing buddy and everyone else, and try and work out a longer-lasting solution to what's happening. In the end, there is no military solution to what we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment, and there is only a political one. You can't bomb your way to peace. It's just not an option. So we've got to go back to those political solutions, and that, from Gaza right through to Iran, down to Yemen, it's just political solutions that we need, and that's really hard to get to. It's a lot easier to say than it is to do, but we have to absolutely keep trying, and I think that's where New Zealand can help out and speak up. And we shouldn't underestimate ourselves here, Leah. New Zealand actually has pretty good relations with a lot of the Gulf states. Christopher Luxon was up in the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, earlier this year because we signed a trade deal with the UAE. We also concluded negotiations on a deal with the wider Gulf Cooperation Council. It's made up of 6 countries, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait and Oman. So, there's a chance there for New Zealand, I think, to build on those good relations. The Qatari Prime Minister, who was intricately involved apparently in the ceasefire arrangement, he visited Wellington last August. So Christopher Luxon probably has his phone number in his phone somewhere. He should use it. He should give him a call. Perhaps give it a day or two because he's probably busy right now. But we do need Christopher Luxon, Winston Peters, Judith Collins. They need to be working the phones and talking with other leaders and their counterparts. And Christopher Luxon is right there in the thick of it at the moment at the NATO summit this week. Starts today in The Hague. So he'll have a good chance. He'll be able to talk to Donald Trump himself, perhaps to Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, Emmanuel Macron, the French President, Friedrich Merz, the new German Chancellor, Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister. The real who's who will be there in The Hague. And it's a great opportunity to get some face time with these leaders and just to put New Zealand's perspective.
Well, we will keep watching, Jeffrey, with interest. Thank you for your time. Nice to talk. That is Jeffrey Miller, geopolitical analyst, and you guys have rolled in with your thoughts already, which I like. And they're all not very nice either. Peter says, Leah, the Iranian regime is dedicated to destroying Israel in the West. They have caused misery and unrest. The only solution is for them to go. They will never change their unholy mission of destruction. Craig believes this guy's a doomsdayer and woke, says Peter. They're 2 different texts, by the way. All right, guys. You're just not buying it. John goes, Leah, the US taking out Iran's nuclear bombs project was a triumph for the whole world. Iran has never negotiated in good faith, says John. All right, team. Good on you. Hey, stunners. Oh, that's a nice one. Stunners. Didn't Trump quite literally bomb his way to peace? Why does everyone jump on the anti-Trump train? Is it because a fashionable and cool man loves Alana? No, I suppose. Can you bomb your way to peace? I don't know. You guys seem quite happy with, bombing away. That's fine then. If that's the way it goes, that's the way it's going. I just know that, we will feel the heat from it down here, that we will see it affect New Zealand, and just nice to get an idea on what is going on. That's why I like you guys to get in touch. 0800 debate 5050 is the text. Someone thinks he's anti-Trump. I didn't think he was. Did you guys think he was anti-Trump? He actually said that he did negotiate peace in Gaza for 2 months. He did that, he reckons, and he's trying to do it now. So I didn't think all you heard was, I don't know, sometimes I think some people think if there's just one little bad thing said about Donald Trump, you're anti-Trump. Paul feels that the left media is desperate for a war they screeched should not happen. They know war is great for advertising revenue and curated clips for Labour to campaign on. Oh, dear me.